Sunday talks about sex, baby. Sunday talks about you and me. Sunday talks about all the things pertaining to living with HIV. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Hey, all right, it's Sunday. You know what that means?
People are going to church, right?
Whew, you keep doing this.
I know.
They're going to church and having sex.
Okay.
Sex talk. Sex talk.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Sex talk.
My pastor just preached a good word, so my head was just, not in the right space.
Introduce me to him when you get down. Get a chance.
Right. Go ahead.
So we're here with yet another episode of Sunday Talks, Sunday Sex Talks, coming together talking all things HIV. We've covered a lot so far.
Yes.
We've covered HIV 101. We've talked about disclosure. We've talked about PrEP. We've even talked about HIV medication adherence, right? So we've talked about all the things, and today we're moving into a little lane that's even more personal to me, I guess.
But let me, before we get too far into the people that's out there, who are you? Well, let's
start there. They might not have seen other episodes, friend. Let's do that. All right, I am Pastor Darrly Brown Jr., the founding senior pastor of Kingdom Builders Christian Center, as well as the testing specialist at Nebraska AIDS Project. You want to tell people who you are?
Yes. I am Tommy Young Dennis, and I am the outreach coordinator at Nebraska AIDS Project.
There we go. So now the people know who we are. Now we can dive into the things, because I was on a mission. I was on a roll. So I feel like, friend, today we're talking about HIV and spirituality.
Yes.
So I feel like, obviously, as a pastor, as a person of faith, I feel like faith has literally been one of the major things that has grounded me and has helped propel me to many of the places and experiences that I have today. It has literally been a lifeline for me in a lot of ways. And I think that you, in conversation we've had, you would share that same sentiment.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we are having this discussion today. Because, for me, my faith was a cornerstone in just like arriving to the place where I am now. But I really want to, kind of focus in on your story because, being one of the most renowned pastors
renowned.
in the People's Omaha.
Okay, sip on that.
Can you just talk to us a little bit about the experience, if there was any experience with harm from the faith community when you disclosed your HIV status?
Well, I'll start with this, that my experience with the faith community, coming up, we were always taught that, first of all, being gay was a sin. We were taught that being same-gender loving was a decision that folks just made and decided to do. And so there was always this underlying conflict that was going on for me as related to my sexuality just in general. Before we even arrived at the point of HIV, my experience with sexuality in the church was an interesting circumstance because I felt like there were so many components to who I was and how I showed up that was off track, that was ungodly, that was problematic, that was going to disqualify me from being in relationship with God as well as being utilized for God's mission and God's intention in the earth. And so it was a battle for me for a number of years. Literally was a battle up until the time that I actually contracted HIV. I really wrestled and struggled with how I understood my sexuality for myself versus how other people had communicated what that was supposed to be interpreted as for me. And so that was really a difficult struggle because I feel like there's a part of me that people are celebrating, but there's a part of me that if people knew, they would definitely condemn. Because before I ever arrived in any major church position. Now, I've been preaching since I was 15, but before I took on an actual position in anyone's church, the knowledge about my sexuality was there. It was there. It was not like a new revelation that just came upon me midlife. No, like the reality and the knowledge of it was there. And so it took for me to dig and do some digging of my own and some studying of my own and just really taking an assessment of my own experience with the God that I serve. Mm-hmm. And understanding that I had not personally, in my relationship with God, received the level of heaviness and the weight of condemnation that was coming from outside voices. I hadn't received that in my one-on-one encounters. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, again, unbeknownst to people, this was a reality for me prior to people knowing publicly. And so I was very celebrated. I was preaching at various revivals and traveling to various cities and doing all these things, and people were applauding me and yes and great and amen, and he's a dynamic speaker and all of these things, and it's like, but little do y'all know there's this. Mm-hmm. And so what helped me navigate that is in a conversation with my mother when I finally dropped the news on her, which, by the way, was just 2013. Mm-hmm. When I dropped the news on my mother, the conversation that I had with her was that I am the same person that I was before we had this conversation. Mm-hmm. So all of the things that you esteemed about me, celebrated about me, believed in me concerning as relates to myself, relates to my ministry, relates to my parenthood, relates to all of these things, these are realities that have not gone anywhere and have not been dismissed as a result of my sexuality. This is just another layer to that. And so that's just the sexuality piece. That ain't even talking HIV.
Yeah. So I heard you say a couple of things that I specifically wanted to uplift, because while, you felt like, you were being celebrated in one vein, and I've bore witness to that for like the last 10 years. You've been extremely celebrated, but then it was also kind of at the price of you hiding a piece of yourself, because if I remember correctly, you didn't publicly come out with your status until, was it 2019?
2019, June of 2019 to be exact.
When I'm going to be that guy, but when you released your second book yes, titled "I'm Positive I Forgive You: How You Forgave the Man Who Gave You HIV."
Yes.
So, and I'm sure, like, with the release of this book, there was a lot of freedom. So can you talk about that a little bit?
So that was a hard decision to make. I knew that the book had to be done. I knew that the book was an assignment that was heavy on my heart. From the time that I wrote the first book, I knew that this book had to happen. Mm-hmm. And so when I arrived at this moment, first of all, one of the heaviest parts of it for me was about the way that family would receive the book. And more specifically, the way my son would receive the book. Because at the time, my son was 15 years old, and it was really a wrestling match for me, and I had always made up in my own mind that I would share with him at a period in time that felt right. I don't have a whole lot of specifics as far as advice on when folks should disclose to someone, especially like a child. Mm-hmm. At the time that I was diagnosed, though, my son was 9. Mm-hmm. And I felt that it was super inappropriate to share such news with him at 9, because I didn't want him to have to try to navigate that at age 9. And despite the level of education that I had provided up to that point, I felt like he would have still accepted it as some form of death sentence for me. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't disclose, and over the years I didn't disclose. And so when the book was about to come out, I sat down with him first as the book was in the editing process and said, son, there's a book that is about to come out that I wrote about my own story, about me living with HIV. I found out such date. I didn't tell you because such. And his response was so, okay. His response was so honorable. His response to me was, Dad, it's your story. If you feel like you need to tell your story, tell your story. And that literally was probably the most important moment of affirmation that I needed concerning sharing and disclosing. Because I'm like, if my son all right, whoever else just got to work with it. And so he was educated enough. We had had multiple conversations around sexual health and HIV and all of the things. So at that point at 15, he knew enough about it. But coming out and sharing the book, once the book finally came out, I put in the intro of the book, if I remember right, there's a piece in the intro that talks about the fact that everybody will not agree on the relationships that I was engaged in the storyline. Folks won't agree. They'll have problems with the issue of sexuality. They'll have issues with HIV, like all the stuff. And so if nothing else, I presented the book to people as, here are tools that will help you with healing in general. And even if you disagree theologically with the relationship, even if you disagree about disclosing something of that magnitude, if nothing else, folks can agree about the importance of forgiveness. And here are tools to help with that. So but that was a journey arriving there, because I felt like first of all, like the way folks talk about HIV is people say things like, you done caught that shit. Excuse my French, okay?
Listen.
But this is what the people are saying, okay? Can we just tell it like it is?
Listen, and as a matter of fact, I remember like a couple weeks ago, I think you posted a snap where you were talking about COVID-19 and people having the tendency to put "the" in front of the word COVID-19. Well, I've heard similar things happen with HIV and AIDS.
Baby,
like
first of all, folks are quick to say AIDS.
Right.
Skip HIV.
Skip HIV.
Just not. And now there's a movement to stop utilizing even AIDS as freely as people do, because it is stigmatizing. It is problematic because, like, generally speaking, there is, first of all, AIDS is just an advanced version of HIV, right? Like, and so for people to put you at the end of your journey in some instances already was problematic.
The end of a journey that you won't ever see, by the way.
Like, that's another conversation, right?
Okay.
So like the progression process is not just easily displayed for folks, and using the term AIDS is like really presumptive. Like you really are putting a person in a particular medical category, if I can say it that way. I had heard people refer to HIV as the gay curse. I had heard that it was God's response to homosexuality, and nothing could be so preposterous. Like nothing could be crazier than that, right? Like, so God unleashed a whole disease to punish a specific group of people, but more than the specific group of people are contracting the virus. So now,
make that make sense.
So God is giving a virus to folks that it ain't got nothing to do with. Make it make sense to me. But so these are the things that you hear. You caught HIV rather than contract, like it's a common cold and somebody breathed on you, and just. There's a lot of pieces.
There's a lot.
And language matters, right?
Very much. And I definitely wanted to uplift that piece in this episode is, the fact that there's so much education that needs to be done and that there are ways that you can address people who are living with HIV without further stigmatizing the virus itself.
I think important is what you just said. You said people living with HIV.
Yeah.
That people first language is so important because like people are not their diagnosis.
Absolutely.
People are not the conditions that they are wrestling with in life or that they're dealing with. Like that's not who they are. It's a part of their experience. It's a part of their identity, but it is not who they are in totality, right?
That's all.
And so like we don't run around calling anybody syphilis. We'll call them syphilis. We'll call them herpes. We'll call them none of that.
None of that.
We'll call you diabetes. We don't call you cancer. So I mean, I just don't.
None of that.
To be clear.
Right.
So
Right.
I think it is important that we use people first language. The first letter of HIV is the H, which stands for human, because folks living with HIV, we still human, y'all.
Still human. Ain't nothing changed. So I want to go back because we talked about language, how language matters, and then just bringing it around back to HIV and spirituality. Have you had an experience of dealing with fellow pastors, clergy people, where there have been words, or whether it be to your face or underhandedly? Have you had that unfortunate experience?
Have.
Okay. Tell us about it.
Have never, to date, had anyone directly approach me. No pastor has approached me specifically about the matters of my sexuality or the matters of my diagnosis. There was never a direct approach about that. Things that would came back secondhand or were subliminal messages that would transpire during services that I would attend. Real passive aggressive power dynamics going on. I'll never forget we had folks can put the dots together. They can put the dots together if they need to. That's their business. I'll never forget I was in a service. We had sang in a musical, and it was a community choir that had come together here locally. And this same pastor that was very, very vocal during particular community meetings and things about none of the pastors of this group should be performing same-sex marriages and none. And this was a consistent theme that kept coming up in meetings that I was in, and I'm like, okay, are you trying to say something to me? Let's just we can skip across all of that. At this point, I feel like you're talking to me without talking to me. But this particular time, we were at their church, and we had sang a musical. And during the benediction, for those that may not be the church-going type, benediction is the closing prayer at church. It's usually the "May God bless you while you leave from here" kind of prayer. That prayer turned into, instead of "May God bless you while you leave here," turned into, "And Lord, we know that the world is in a crazy place. And Lord, men are sleeping with men. And women are sleeping with women. And Lord, we need you to touch right now." And I'm like, wait a minute. Folks started looking up from the benediction prayer like, how did we get here? And so, to answer your question, very indirectly, yes, there have been conversations. I'll never forget, one of my musicians was playing at another church, and one of the members of their church came to them and said, "Where you been playing?" They shared the church that they had been playing at my church, and after sharing that, they then responded and said, "Quit saying that. That ain't no church over there.
Ooh, yeah.
Not the gay church. That ain't no church over there."
Gay church. My goodness.
So the dismissal of the effectiveness of the impact, the condemnation, the snide remarks, at one period in time, until the book came out, the minimizing of invites. I'm sure you all that have been with me for a while can attest to the fact that there were spaces that we had stopped being invited to, once the book came out and got a good little amount of celebration, things shifted. And then all of a sudden we were invited. We were singing here and there, preaching here and there, and all of the things. And so, booked and busy, baby. You hear me? But I say that to say that it really caused me to have to get into a journey of my own, to dig at what do I believe, what do I understand to be true, what has been my experience with God. Because make no mistake about it, the reality is that, unfortunately, people are the problem, not the God of the people. And when I say that, I mean that we all come to the table concerning any topic with our own level of bias.
Absolutely.
And our own upbringing. We bring all of that, all of our own experience, all of what has been put in front of us. We bring all of that to the table when we approach a biblical text, when we approach a subject matter, all of the things, we bring all of that to the table. And so in a lot of instances, I arrived at a place of mercy to people because I understood that they were only showing me what had been taught to them. And if that dynamic was going to change, I had to be fluent enough in my own experience and my own education to be able to present it a different way.
Got you.
And my goal is not to, I don't want to change nobody's religion. I just want to change the way some people view certain things and understand that there is no specific condemnation that has been dealt out by God concerning the gays, concerning HIV. None of that is the reality. And that my experience with my God has been that I am precisely the person that I am supposed to be. My experience has been that I show up and make precisely the impact that I am supposed to make. My experience has been that my ministry is helpful and beneficial to other individuals, and that is despite what others may find to be a character flaw, which is for other people a wonderful experience and a God-given experience.
So, thank you for that. Thank
no
you
problem. I feel like I ran my mouth.
No, because I asked for it. I asked for it. But I think there was a lot of useful content that you just provided us with, and I like how you were very intentional. About just sharing your experience and the principles that you gathered, walking throughout this 7 years living with HIV. One thing that I wanted to uplift, because I think when we were coming up with the concept for this episode, we were very intentional about titling it HIV and Spirituality.
Absolutely.
Because we realized that there were, our generation, how certain people feel about just the religion as an institution.
Absolutely.
So I say that to say that, I really wanted to hit home on the fact that you can live with HIV, have your own personal relationship with God, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. But one thing I wanted to discuss before we wrap up, what messaging would you give to people, or would you advise people to subscribe to when they're even considering, spirituality while living with HIV? Because I know that can be a very loaded topic.
I think it is important to find your people. Let me start there. Find your people. I think that we make the mistake of categorizing, of overgeneralizing. We generalize people to be a part of one specific group, when in reality, under the umbrella of that group, there are various pockets. And that's no different with regard to Christianity for me. And I assuming that's understanding that people that are viewing may not subscribe to Christianity. That's just my faith walk. That's my faith journey. And I can only share my experience, right? And so, but find your people, because under that umbrella of Christianity, if we look at the United Methodist Church, for example, there has literally been this divide that is specific to the issue of sexuality and their stance on homosexuality. And so understanding that we're still talking about one denomination, but we're talking about a split in that denomination that is the result of a difference in beliefs. And that's no different than anybody's church, because in one church, no matter what the church is, in one church you find a variety of belief systems concerning various topics. That's in any faith circle. So you need to find your people that support and uphold who and how you are in a way that is going to be beneficial to you, that's going to support your walk, that's going to help further your growth. In addition to that, I say live shame-free. When I say live shame-free, I mean show up as your total self. Because once you have found your people, you don't want to allow anyone to make you feel as if you're worthless or you're less than because of a condition that you have. You have HIV. HIV does not have you. And so understanding that, and then understanding that God has called us to live an abundant life.
Yes. Preach.
And so we are to be living from a space of abundance. And a space of abundance does not shoot yourself down, knock yourself down, talk bad about yourself, does not feel less than, does not walk in shame, does not walk in guilt, does not walk in condemnation. That's not abundant living, right? Yes. And so if abundant living is what we are supposed to be doing, we have to be in a space of inclusivity. We have to be in a space that honors and affirms people's identities and their lived experience and their attractions and all of these things. And so I believe that if COVID has taught us nothing else, we have an opportunity to reimagine what all things can look like. And we are at a particular circumstance where, although there are several correlations between COVID and HIV that I wish people would stop making.
Please.
I want to be clear.
Please.
That there are, if nothing else, the experience of stigma, the experience of the unknown, the experience of treatment from medical professionals and things of that sort. There are various correlations between the two. And as we had to fight to shift that for people living with HIV, from like folks like shoving the food in the hospital room without coming through the door, like, here, take this, go about your business. We don't want to touch you, we don't want to come in there, we're scared of you. And now you see folks coming in rooms because of COVID, same kind of circumstances sometimes in some situations. I think that it is important to understand that your condition is not the end all be all, and that you can live a normal, abundant life.
Abundantly. I think you said it earlier. Like, there is no room in your life. If we are meant to live abundantly, there's no room for shame. Period. So, that being said, I think we talked about a lot, and I hope that it was helpful to you all. But before we wrap up, why don't you just tell the people where they can find us? Because you know,
if you insist,
I'm gonna give you the man of white treatment. So
listen, the book is available on my website, DarrylBrownJr.com. That's DarrylBrownJr.com. Or you can order it from Amazon. It is available locally at various bookstores. I won't even go through the list of bookstores, but locally. Most of the bookstores locally have the book available as well. Get your copy, and if nothing else, reach out to me personally. I do still have a couple copies in my own room that I can get to you as well. So I appreciate it. It shares my journey to healing, right?
Yes.
Not only did HIV jack my behind up in an emotional and mental way, but the situationship that I was in, that I talk about in the book. It's all the juicy details there in the book. The relationship that I was in was damaging in a lot of ways, but I am at a place in life now where I'm grateful for every relationship that I've had, and I'm grateful, even this sounds weird, I'm grateful for HIV.
Hey.
I'm grateful for the ways in which it changed my life, challenged my life, shifted my life, and gave me a platform from which to reach other people.
All right. Well,
That
being said, let's send these people off.
May you all have the day that you want people living with HIV to have.